In the spring of 1834, the countryside of rural Virginia was quiet, painfully quiet. White farmhouses stood miles apart, separated by fields, dirt roads, and silence. Neighbors knew one another by habit, not by closeness. What happened behind closed doors was rarely questioned. At the edge of this countryside stood a modest but well-kept home, owned by the Sullivan family, a husband and wife who appeared unremarkable to those who passed by. Stern, reserved, deeply religious. The kind of people no one suspected. But beneath that house, beneath the floorboards, lay a secret so horrific it would scar the region for generations. This is the story of the Sullivan family and the basement where 47 children were found chained. The Sullivans were known as quiet benefactors. They often spoke of taking in lost children, claiming it was God's work. Orphans, runaways, children of poor families, many simply vanished into their care. In the 1832, there was no centralized child welfare system, no records, no follow-ups. A child could disappear without a trace, especially if they were poor. When families asked questions, they were told the children had been sent away, adopted, or put to work on distant farms. And people believed them, because the Sullivans looked respectable, because the house looked clean, because no one wanted to imagine what could be happening beneath their feet. It began with whispers. A traveler claimed he heard crying beneath the house while seeking shelter during a storm. A delivery man noticed chains clinking when the cellar door briefly opened. A neighbor mentioned that no children were ever seen playing outside. Then came the smell. A heavy, rotting odor that drifted through the fields during warm nights. The Sullivans blamed spoiled meat, dead livestock, poor drainage. Again, people believed them. Until one night, a child escaped. Just before dawn, a barefoot boy no older than 10 collapsed on a nearby road. His wrists were raw, his ankles bleeding, he could barely speak. When questioned, his words came out broken and terrified. "There are more down there. They're chained." The local constable at first assumed delirium, but when he saw the iron marks on the boy's skin, old scars layered over new wounds, he knew something was wrong. By midday, a small group of men returned with the boy to the Sullivan property. What they found would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The cellar door resisted at first, swollen shut from years of neglect. When it finally opened, a wave of stench poured out so strong it forced grown men to their knees. The basement was dark, windowless, damp. As lanterns were lowered, shapes began to move. Children. Dozens of them. 47. Some were chained to the walls, others to wooden beams sunk deep into the foundation. Many were naked or dressed in rags. Most were malnourished. Several could not stand. Iron collars circled their necks. Some children had been there for years. Others were too weak to cry. One officer later wrote that the silence was worse than screams because it meant some children no longer had the strength to make noise. Records from the time suggest systematic abuse. The children were starved as punishment, beaten for noise, chained to prevent escape, forced into labor during the night, then locked below ground during the day. Why? Money, control, obsession. Some children were allegedly rented out as laborers under false names. Others were never meant to leave alive. The Sullivans reportedly believed they were purifying children, breaking them of sin through suffering. When confronted, they showed no remorse. Only silence. The discovery spread quickly but not cleanly. Many records vanished. Some children were returned to families who barely recognized them. Others disappeared into institutions. A few died shortly after rescue. The Sullivan house was abandoned within months. Locals refused to pass it at night. Even today, stories persist of chains rattling beneath the earth, of cries carried by the wind, of a basement that should never have existed. Because sometimes, the worst monsters do not hide in shadows. They live in plain sight.